Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore. Boggy Talk is recorded on Boggy Bayou in Niceville, Florida, and is hosted by Justin Wyatt and James Ross, pastors at Church on Bayshore. We typically want every matter of faith and life to have crystal clear answers, but it isn't always that easy. This podcast digs in to help Christians think with a kingdom mentality about topics that sometimes get muddy and bog us down. So let's dive in.
Well, hello and welcome to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you are joining us today for this not new series on inside the church, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Speaking of the good, the bad, and the ugly, just kidding. Hey, I've got joined today with James Ross, lead pastor at Church on Bayshore, but we also have an awesome guest today. We're joined here by Mr. Steve Renna. Hey, Steve.
Which one was the bad and which one was the ugly?
I am leaving that up to interpretation. So, Steve, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good.
James, you doing all right, buddy?
Have we had any comments on who's good, bad, and ugly yet?
We've not. So if you want to leave that comment, go for it.
Please don't.
If you want,
I've got too many insecurities.
that'll make you ugly. That'll make you the ugly if you do that.
Yeah.
I'll get plenty of those.
Yeah.
Just from Jordan, your wife.
Jordan, no.
Steve, this is Steve's first time on Boggy Talk.
Welcome.
Boggy Talk newbie. All right. That's our theme song. I just made it up for people when it's their
Nice.
first time. I had a different one last week for Michael.
How you guys, before we get started, let's talk about important things. How you guys adjusting to daylight savings time?
Hate it.
It's dumb.
It is. It's so dumb.
I like this time. I want it to stay this time.
I mean, yeah, but can we just not go back again? Like we just stay. Like they keep dangling this that the rumor is I hear that Congress is going to vote on it. And I hear the House is.
But
voting
Florida voted on it.
Yeah,
we voted on it.
But
and we're the best.
Yeah, at everything, So I don't understand why it's not a real thing, and we have to fall back later, but we do, and it's terrible.
Maybe if somebody gives an address at the State of the Union about it, things will change.
That'll
That'll affect the science. That'll affect the science. Too soon? Too soon?
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Way too soon.
That's another Boggy Talk.
Oh, well, Steve has never been on Boggy Talk because he's really afraid, actually, because his wife is going to watch this and then critique him on everything that he says.
So let everybody know
Yeah.
Steve's connection with Boggy Talk, other than that his beloved pastors are on there. The voice.
Oh, yeah, you hear his wife, Jordan. I was like, what is Steve's Steve's wife, Jordan, is the voice.
He cut the checks for everything
right. He
we do.
approved us buying microphones. She's the one who does the intro and the outro to Boggy Talk every week. And so that's Jordan.
Can you do a Jordan
Let's hear
Boggy
your
Talk
best Jordan
impersonation?
voice. No.
Your best
can't.
Jordan
I
voice.
can't. I don't do impersonations.
Sing like Jordan. Ready?
Yeah, no.
Not many people can actually
No.
sing like Jordan because Jordan
That's
can
true.
sing.
She can
leads us
sing.
in worship, and it's always great. Yes.
Yeah, it is great.
So, hey.
I always prefer when she sings instead of you, Justin.
No, thanks. I appreciate that. Most people do.
I would. Never mind. That's good. That should have used that one in the podcast 2 weeks ago when people pick out their favorite singers.
Yes,
and like,
that's right.
Let
I
everybody
love it
know
when
that.
person leans and when that person leans. I'm like, well, maybe not. Can you publish who's leading every week so we can decide if we're coming or watching? Actually, some people do that.
Oh, they do. I
Speaking
know.
of money,
I know.
well,
All right.
I've already had my
Terrible
time
idea.
about worship.
Terrible
So,
Yes. Okay.
So we are talking about, we framed this series around our Discipleship Essentials, Worship, Grow, Serve, Give, Reach. And we have talked about worship, we've talked about growing, we've talked about serving, and now we welcome Steve talking about giving. And so Steve, while we're asking you, it's because you got all the money, man.
No, I don't. God's got the money.
That's right. So Steve serves as our church administrator. And so a large part of his responsibility here on our church staff is to ensure that we as a church, not just our staff, but we as a church are stewarding the resources God has entrusted with us for his kingdom. And I'll say he does a great job at that.
God does or Steve?
Both.
Oh, okay.
God does a great
Okay.
job.
Okay.
And God does a great job through Steve.
Okay, got it.
His willing
That's
vessel.
Good answer,
so,
Justin.
Thank you. I've been, trying to practice my theology.
Is that what's written down right there on that piece of paper?
No, these are my
that
notes
stuff.
that I can
I didn't know I could bring
barely
notes.
read. You can bring notes. I bring an outline and then I usually ignore it. So
Justin writes in shorthand, so that's actually his manuscript.
that's right.
There you go.
So, but Steve, before we talk about giving and that. Let's talk about your background, because you were not always in the dream field of church administration. So I just think of so many little boys and girls who in their elementary classrooms who think, when I grow up, I want to work and be underappreciated as a church administrator.
That's true.
But so
I never really thought of it that way, but now that you put it that way, it's
but
pretty bang on accurate.
your background,
You keep going down.
It's sinking.
all right.
The microphone is.
I gave Steve
That's
the
why we really
sinking
have
chair.
you here. We need new chairs.
That's
Can we
right.
get approved
This is our way of
for that?
proving.
Yeah.
So
Move this sideways.
your background though, before you worked here at Church on Bay Shore, you had your own business in construction, and before that, you actually worked in corporate finance. Correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So most people who don't know what corporate finance is have no clue what that means. So in 30 seconds or less, go.
I just think of Bernie Madoff and Bernie Sanders when I hear corporate finance. One loves it, one hates it.
It wasn't like that. It was real commercial finance. So I worked for a very large bank, Deutsche Bank. They're one of the largest banks in the world. And when companies would start businesses that required a lot of inventory, we would loan them money to purchase. Actually, we wouldn't loan them money. We would purchase the inventory for them on a line of credit. So we still own the inventory. And then they would sell it at a profit. And of course, they had to sell it within a certain amount of time, or we would charge them money.
Yeah,
that's how we made money.
That's how you make money.
Is on the money. But it was a lot of direct communication and working with businesses of all sizes. Yeah, thank you. I can lower it again.
There you go. We're gonna adjust Steve's microphone.
Yeah, as I sing
He
through
sinks
the
down.
whole thing. Awesome. Yeah, so I worked directly with businesses, and there was a lot of good in it. In that, you felt like you were helping smaller businesses survive. The large businesses could self-fund, but the smaller businesses needed the help of the banks. So it was a great partnership until the markets crashed in certain areas. Then it was not so
fun.
much. I went from the good guy to the bad guy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, and as we are, in ministry, we're constantly trying to lead people to, follow Jesus, and whatever that means in terms of their work life, to live sent and leverage that for the kingdom. And you did that, and then you worked in construction, own your own business, but then God led you to serve on this church staff. So I want you very briefly too, just to share, how did God do that in your life? Because that's a different trajectory than most people take.
Yeah, so that's hard to be short, but like you said, when you're a kid, you don't dream about this. And like a lot of people coming out of college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with myself. Half the time, a lot of adults still don't know what they want to do with themselves. Yeah. But I went into commercial finance, and even though I was doing well in commercial finance, something was missing. And I just knew something was missing, and I wasn't where I needed to be with God. I moved into insurance, and I sold commercial insurance to businesses, and I did well at that, but I still had that same feeling like something was missing. Then I started the construction company, and still, looking back, like I didn't know where I was going, but God knew exactly what He was doing. He had a plan, because the Lord really started working on me to give more, to serve more, and especially when the housing market really crashed. I wasn't able to give as much as I wanted to be giving in my heart and felt like I needed to be. And there was a moment really when the Lord spoke to me, and I just said, Lord, I recognize that I've been pushing back against your plan. And so I'm not going to do that anymore. When you open doors to serve you more, I'm going to say yes. And it was like, as soon as I said that to the Lord, He's like, all His doors started opening. He's like, okay, look, I have a plan for you. And, looking back, the things that you need to be an effective church administrator is you've got to understand finances. You've got to understand personnel, human resources, insurance, things like that. You've got to understand buildings and construction and all these things. And I go, God had a plan even when I was just kind of floating through life, feeling like I was doing well and chasing Paul says to have your mind set on the things of God, not a mind set on the flesh, on worldly things. I was set on the flesh, on worldly things. I mean, I wanted to make money, I wanted to do well, I want to start a business, and all these things. And God just, you need to change your mindset. And by the way, I've been preparing you for this for years.
That's good.
God's good.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's good that we highlight this, because a lot of people who have probably met you in the last couple of years just think, okay, he's church finance guy, he's church administrator guy. But the reality is you were a member of the church who the Lord just kind of called. You were faithfully serving, giving, all those things. So I think that really kind of segues into the first question I want to ask you, because if you ask most people what the biggest challenge is when it comes to the church accomplishing its mission, it's the 20-80 rule. It's the reality that 20% of the church is giving, doing 80% of the work, and giving 80% of the money. And the other 80% are giving 20%, and doing 20%. So, as someone who the Lord called to say, hey, I want to be a part of that 20%. And again, I think our church has probably a healthier number than most churches, but by and large, do you see that it's true from both of, being non-church staff and now church staff? And why do you think it is that way?
Oh, well, yeah, I think it's absolutely true. I would say that, yes, I believe we're a little bit better than the 20-80 rule, but it's not that much better. And when you look at the demographics of giving, there's a lot of misconceptions about who gives and who doesn't. Mm-hmm. It's not always accurate, but it definitely is that small percentage that is giving most. And, before I came on staff, when I look at the people that are serving and doing, when I was serving on, MLTs and being part of the trustees, it's always a challenge. We're trying to get new people to serve. We don't want to recycle the same people. We want people with fresh hearts and new ideas and so forth. And in every scenario, it's always been a challenge to find new people to step up, to be involved. But every time someone new gets involved, it brings perspective to things that when you've served in any scenario for a very long time, it's easy to lose perspective on some things, or to lose connection with cultural things that are going on. And so it's been a challenge before I came on staff, and then coming on staff and having seeing the information of yes, I can get as specific as who gives what. I don't really get into that, but when I look at from a demographic perspective, you mean
you don't look at people and see dollar signs?
Yeah, I don't do that.
Just rest assured, everyone.
Very specific. I don't do that. But that is a burden, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a tough burden because we keep that information very confidential. Only a couple of people have access to it, and boy, that's hard sometimes. It's hard because sometimes when those who don't give. And you kind of why? Mm-hmm. Why? I know the Lord's done things in your life, and then you see the other side of it. People who are just give so generously, and no one knows it, and that's really good. That's the kind of person I want to be. Right. Don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. And there are those in the church, so it's both highly encouraging and it's also disheartening at times to know that information. But what it really highlights is when I look at it, I go, gosh, if the Lord would change hearts of all our people, the potential of the church is so much greater than anybody realizes. And we got a little glimpse of this when we went through the first Hope for the Future project, when the entire church was 100% on board with a vision to impact the lives of kids. Mm-hmm. We realized
little goats. We had a big
kidding.
I know.
We saw the potential of the church.
I hadn't said a wisecrack in a while, so I had to get my quote up per episode.
Is there a timer? There's like a timer over there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. And really, I walked into that, and it was clear that the Lord had just stirred in a lot of people's hearts to be sacrificial. And that, the old saying is not equal gifts, it's equal sacrifice, and really that is the goal. Well, speaking of that, I think one of the things that we're wrestling through as a church, and every church is wrestling through, is there is a huge chasm, huge gap when it comes to a commitment to the local church in terms of giving from generation to generation, and really if you look at the millennial generation that's entering the, high earning season of life, just comparatively to the generations before. Is that true? And what do you think we do about that?
Well, yeah, it's when you look at demographics, it's certainly true. We have a challenge of teaching the next generation about giving. And certainly the people who give, it's far skewed towards the 40s, 50s, 60s and up is where the vast majority comes from. And there are people in that age group in the late 30s and even into the 40s and into 50s that are not bringing the full tithe into the storehouse. And the question is why? And the thing is, it's not that the younger generations are not generous. A lot of them are giving money other places. In the years that I've been here, there's been discussions about that, and it's the mentality is I'm tithing because I'm giving to this other thing, and it's a good thing. Okay, well, you can do a lot of good things. It's that same mentality. I'm a good person. I'm going to get to heaven. No. You get to heaven because of what Jesus did on the cross for you. And you can give and be a good person, but that doesn't mean you're actually submitting to the Lord. And that's what giving is about. It's about submitting to the Lord in obedience. And the thing that gets missed is you can do a lot of things individually that are good things, that are things that the Lord wants you to do, in caring for people. That's not to diminish anything you might do personally, but what the church can do corporately, together as a body of Christ, is so much more than you can do individually with the resources that you have. We look at the cooperative program and we see the church planting and the support of missionaries and the things that take place. That's only possible because of the whole church, capital C, coming together, giving that full tithe to the Lord and seeing his kingdom grow as a result. If that doesn't happen, if you're doing things all individually, there's a great benefit to corporately coming together for the mission of Christ.
Well, you brought up some things that kind of get to some of the good, the bad, and the ugly inside the church. So I want to kind of prod at some of that stuff. But before I do that, Justin, are you anything?
Yeah, I just think, we want to operate from this place of imagine if. Imagine if everybody, not even gave sacrificially. What if everybody just gave the basement? The tithe. That's not even, for some people that is going to be sacrificial because of where they are in life. But just imagine if people did that. And I think if the church just had that picture of this is what God could do if we all just were bottom line obedient. Oh, yeah. Imagine what it could do if we all actually were sacrificial. And I think, we hear, and maybe this is where James is going to poke, but there's excuses we all have made and that people continue to make. Some of them are silly. I've heard people say, I don't tithe because I pay taxes. Or I don't need to tithe because I'm in the military. I've heard that, and I'm like,
what? Sorry, never heard that one.
Well, but yeah,
because they know.
They're scaring me. I'm just saying, and I haven't heard those things at this church.
Okay.
So I'll just clarify. But I've heard those things. Those are things that people think, or get into I don't tithe because I don't trust how the church. Or I want to specify how the church spends money, and so that
is where I kind of want to dig, because I think that we could talk about the excuses people make in their own life, and we have you here, so I want to talk more. So one of the objections that people, specifically younger people, more idealistic people, would say is, well, I'm going to give to the church, but the church spends so much money on buildings, and the pastors get paid so much, and all those things, and is that fair? And if so, why do we spend as much as we do on, those things?
Yeah, well, first I would say, is it fair to question that? And the answer is yes. Absolutely, it's fair to question that. We should always be questioning how we're stewarding God's resources, and always questioning what is the most effective we can be in accomplishing the mission that He's set forth for us. However, under having a background with business before I came in here, when I look at what the church does, the resources that the church has compared to the resources that most average businesses have and what we try and accomplish, they couldn't be any more different. We take in funds and we say, how can we get rid of all of it? All of it for the work of Christ. We're not in this to stockpile money to make. In fact, if you guys don't spend certain money you have, the stewardship team or me comes knocking on your door saying, we have a mission and we are to reach people. Spend your money and execute your ministry plan. If businesses are making money, they're just, hey, we're making money. This is great. So it's certainly a good thing to question whether we're doing that. But I would simply say this, and I said this a few weeks back about the campus and the facilities, is that they are simply tools to accomplish the work. And part of the work of making disciples is training and teaching people. And that happens on this church campus. The other piece of the church campus is that as you have a base of operations, we want to have a large base of operations that grows and more people come to know Christ so that we can send more out, so that we can support more ministries and mission. And, unfortunately, that costs money. I mean, we have an 80,000 square foot facility. At any given time, we've got $2 million worth of equipment that has to be replaced on life cycle costs. Then we've got to just general maintenance and maintain these things, which is, $20-some thousand a month, and then just what it costs to print, things on paper and put toilet paper in the bathrooms, which is a necessity. Right?
That is a necessity.
Have the air conditioning running and
in Florida for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And all of that are things that are necessary as a tool for our people, not our pastors, our people, to be able to invite people into a comfortable environment where they learn about Christ and grow. And if they haven't committed their life, this is a place to do that. I think it's the value of the local church facilities, the buildings, the people that work here is people. We have this thing where we want to separate out ministry, or we define ministry, and buildings aren't this. Now they're not. It's not the same. But they're used for ministry. They're tools for ministry. It's very hard to accomplish your goals without the right tools.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. One of the things we're trying to do as a church is move towards this 50% ministry and missions. But one of the things we're trying to be intentional about is reminding when we have that conversation is everything we spend money on is ministry. It's just that we're trying to say, how can we lean towards, that focus of spending money on going out and off campus. But so yeah, I mean, you hit on the facility stuff, but what about these pastors and their private jets and their mansions?
Don't knock my private jet.
As I book my cross-country 4-hour Allegiant flight so that I could save money to get to the SBC just today.
Oh, that's there's so much to say about that.
What have you been wanting to say?
No, I can't even. That bothers me so much to see people who have taken advantage of the church. Let's just face it. That is people taking advantage of the resources that it's God's money that they're stealing. That's the way I feel about it. Is that we're not in ministry for ourselves to further our own purposes. We're certainly not here for money, as most everyone on staff could go anywhere else and make a lot more money. People are here because they love Jesus. They want to serve him. And it's not about that. To see someone in ministry use it for personal gain that way, I believe the Lord's going to deal with them. I have a real hard time seeing it. And, I would just say that the issue I have, or the warning there, is that we have a great church structure, a shared vision. The Lord gives the vision through the pastor, through the congregation, and there are checks and balances because everybody in this church is a sinner.
SINNER, right, is what you said?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
What did you think I said?
Center.
No, not a sinner. A sinner. I mean,
a centaur?
Look,
Yeah.
We're all growing in our relationship with Christ every day, but that doesn't mean there's not temptation.
Mm-hmm.
And we are not to walk in that temptation, and certainly not to create an environment where there's that temptation. And so, having checks and balances, and having stewardship teams, and properties ministry team, and things like that, to have the council of multitudes involved and have eyes on what we're doing all the time. Personnel teams looking at our staff structure and comparing, what the benefits are to other pastors and other churches. That stuff keeps us honest. And there's a mentality sometimes, I think, certainly I've seen it in the ministry of, I'm here to serve God, and so you should just trust me. Mm-hmm. It's not a trust issue. It's that I understand the danger of sin and the pervasive of it. And that's not to say anyone on staff is sinning in that way.
Right.
But we are to intentionally be putting sin to death by any means necessary. And if that means great accountability in everything we do, that's exactly what it means.
So that's why you said no to my shoe allowance?
Well, nixed from the budget.
Yeah.
So I hear
socks. I could get you some socks.
I hear, hey, you're not supposed to wear socks anymore. Anyway, so I hear all you're saying, but at our church, personnel is over $1 million a year. That's the cost. Why should I give? I'm someone else asking this question. Why should I give to the local church when we're spending over $1 million on hiring people to do work?
Well, look, there's a few things. One, when people are here all the time, this is their job. 7 days a week. I mean, it's that's the way the job is.
Yeah.
Whether it's supposed to be 5 days, it's 7 days a week. Almost everybody here works more hours than they're supposed to because they're here for a ministry perspective. Those people who are here day in, day out, living, eating, breathing, worshiping, serving God, can accomplish much more for the Lord and for creating organizational structure that allows you, as somebody who works 40 hours a week or is not in full-time Christian ministry, to be able to come in and be more effective when you're serving. If we don't have the staff, we're not going to have programs structured well to teach your kids and for you to grow in relationship, and opportunities for you to serve, opportunities for you to reach out into the community. Those are all created by the people who are here all the time serving and working. And I would simply say to anyone who asks that question, I think I mentioned it before, that and the personnel team would support this too. When we look at the salaries of the people who are working here, number one, we're all in line with the average for a church, but forget comparing salaries here inside the church. If you were to compare salaries, similar job descriptions of what you accomplish of people in the church compared to people that work anywhere else, we don't make anything close to what we could make somewhere else. So the idea that people see a big number, $1 million. Oh, that's a huge number. We're not being good stewards. When you break it down by position,
and the number of employees, too.
And the number of employees,
you look at our staff
right?
Page, you look, oh, that's a lot of people.
And I got to tell you, look, I had a construction company, so when I looked at my framing crews, I came to the church, and when I first came to the church and I looked at the payroll, first time I'd ever seen the payroll, I looked at people's pay, and I went, you have got to be kidding me. Why are they even here?
Except for the lead pastor and worship pastor who just work on Sunday mornings.
Right.
And we just film
They just work 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
I mean, look,
So-
I got guys whose
Right.
only job is to pick up cut 2x4s on a job site, and throw it in a dumpster, making more money than some
Right,
people
yeah,
on staff.
yeah.
Now, look, I would just simply say, from what I see, there's no argument there.
Right. Yeah.
There's
that
just
makes sense.
the value of it.
What's interesting about all this to me is that, and I'm thinking of specific people who basically are believers. They believe they should give to God, and they bypass the local church because they think they have a greater impact on ministry. And so they give to these organizations. But the reality is those organizations have personnel cost and facility cost and administrative cost too. And I would say that most churches, and definitely this church, are actually doing better in terms of, balancing that. And, and you said something that's important is accountability. Hey, so it's our job. So we should be doing our jobs. You know what I mean? Like we're not subsidizing, good Christians,
Right.
And so I do think that's where some people have seen lazy church staff, and misused facilities, and I think that, and the private jet stories, and I think it's just easy to take those bad examples and kind of lump the 90% of the church that's actually grinding out, so, and facilities that are typically, like this campus and more is cases being utilized
Right.
all the time for community and kingdom stuff. So I think that, the reality is all that. But I would just say that ultimately, like as an individual believer, it's about trusting. Giving is about trusting God. And then as giving to God through that local church, you have every right to then, question in love every decision. This just size of our church. It's if you're going to question every tiny decision, you're going to get, exhausted. But every decision, and we give people at our church, people have a say in the budget process, right? How does that look, Steve?
They're saying the budget process?
Yeah.
I mean, the church votes on the budget.
Right.
So the church elects people to serve on the MLTs who go through that budget process with stewardship, which are all representatives of the church body. So the budget is developed by lay people. It's developed by lay people that have been voted on by the church. So while as staff liaisons to MLTs, we have input on that process and what we're doing. Ultimately, we don't make the decision on the budget. We put together what we believe a solid ministry plan is, and these groups are part of that. The only pieces that we really, as a staff, have control over in developing budget is really our student ministry, our children's ministry. And even with the Discipleship MLT now, there's more input from the lay people in our church to that budget area as well. So the budget is a result, a reflection of our congregation, not of our staff. Our staff is simply tasked with execution of that budget to the very best of our ability. And, you touched on overhead. Every business has overhead and works to minimize that overhead. And we as a church are doing the same thing. That's a big challenge in my job, is to try and lower overhead to the very best of our ability, because every dime more in overhead means less money in the ministry mission areas where we really want it to be. It's an ongoing challenge. But when you are a general for-profit business and you are making profit, overhead doesn't scare you as much. When you're a church that gives away 100% of every bit of profit that you make every year, overhead is that much more important to keep under control. So we work at it.
Yep.
So do you think a good Baptist church administrator would say, I get rid of overhead because God is overhead?
Ooh, that belongs on a church sign.
There you go.
Right.
There you
Steve
go.
actually has that on his
t-shirt
wall in his office. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that, because James mentioned our desire to be more in line with our 50-50 vision, budget, and really, so we're talking about this, not all of this, but a lot of the execution of this falls on you. Granted, you work with pastors, but you're kind of the one, not alone in the middle, but you are the middle of like making sure that we are running with ministry in mind, but also you're the one of all the people pushing for ministry who actually knows how much it costs to turn on the AC and to do.
I
these
deal
things.
with the customers, so the people don't have to.
That's right. So we say all the time, there's problems to solve, there's tensions to manage. This is a big tension for us to manage, because we can't neglect facilities as we seek to do more in the community and in the kingdom. So
Because my 13-year-old son will send pictures of the facility.
yeah, I mean, like, this is lane, this is other. So maybe Steve, what are your guiding principles like in this, like, because you make these decisions, you have these conversations, and I think you do it really well. So if you were to, how does how do you do it, man? Like,
What exactly do you do here?
What do you do?
Yeah.
So really, what are you guiding? Like, how do you manage that tension? Well, because it's not every decision is black and white, and there's times when you're just like, all right, I think this is the best choice based on these options.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, look, the first thing I would say is that the counsel of multitude matters. So for me, one, I have very specific guidelines that I have to follow. There is accountability for me as well. I answer to the stewardship team. I answer to the personnel team. And I have to be able to answer for everything that's done and spent in the church. So while I am in the middle, I'm not alone in the oversight, which is...
You have like 19 different bosses.
Well, that's true.
I'm just figuring out how many office space quotes I can throw
true.
in there.
Yeah, you're getting them in. But I would say as far
You
as...
could just do some extra flair.
Yeah. Hold on, here we go. Flair. No, but balancing that tension is really important because oftentimes I feel like, I can be the lone voice saying, hey, we need to put a lot of money into escrow for our facilities. And look, nobody wants to do that.
Yeah, nobody does it.
Nobody does.
Even you don't really want
not
to.
even me, right?
Should we give to the children in Guatemala or escrow for
an air conditioning? Like this is not exciting stuff. And when you think of ministry, you certainly don't think, I got to put $10,000 a month away to be able to handle air conditioning units. That's not exciting, but as far as a guiding principle, the reason why I fight for those things to happen is that I have seen this church in the past not put enough money away and not plan appropriately, where something breaks down unexpectedly. And at that point, we have to pay for it. So we're stealing from any area we can take from. And typically that gets taken from ministry or mission areas or reserves and things like that. So look, my guiding principle is this. Properties is something that is fairly easy to plan for 10, 20, even 30 years out. I want to plan appropriately so that when something happens that might not be according to the plan, we are financially prepared to address it without impacting our ministry and mission goals.
It's good.
So it is still about our ministry and mission goals. And what can happen very easily is that we don't budget appropriately, and then we find ourselves really far behind. Then we have 10 years. It has literally taken us almost 8 years of trying to get us back on a good financial pathway to managing our facilities because we got behind. We can't afford to have to get behind to where it takes many years to get back where we need to be, because that's many years of impacting ministry and mission. That's not what we want to do.
So how much did playing SimCity help you to figure out how to do
I have never, ever played SimCity.
That seems like you would just I loved that game. I
don't play video games.
Like a long time
Just
ago.
so you know, this is insight into how Steve's job goes, because I'm
Yeah, he's
constantly
like, he's
doing
like,
stuff
"What?
like this
What
to
are you
Steve
talking about?"
in real life.
Yeah.
It's true.
So I have one more pressing question that I know is kind of the good, the bad, the ugly of the church is debt. So there are people who are adamantly opposed to the churches taking on any debt. There are people who say the church should just function like a business, and a lot of businesses take on a lot of debt. I mean, and I know we're starting to run out of time, but what are just some quick thoughts on the church and debt? I don't mean our church specifically, but, of course, pertaining to our church as well.
Well, I'd start with our church.
Yeah.
And all I would say is that this church has been here since 1910. And I would simply ask somebody, do you think this church has had any kingdom impact since 1910? And if
Yes.
okay, good. Yeah, I have one person who gets it.
Debatable. That's debatable.
Define kingdom impact.
Yeah, that's true. And when you look at the history of the church, there's not a single structure on this campus that was built, completed to be a tool for ministry where we did not have to borrow some money to be able to accomplish it. And from a scriptural standpoint, the scripture talks about how if you have debt, here's the way you are to handle that debt. So yes, do we want to have debt? No, we don't. If we have debt, we're going to manage it in the way the scripture tells us to manage it. So I don't see scripturally where where it says you should not go into debt at all. It simply says we don't want to be indebted to anyone.
You haven't read the book of Dave Ramsey, chapter 2 and chapter 3.
Yeah, that's true.
Man, people will quote him
I
like
know,
he wrote
I
the
know.
Bible.
I'm like, dude, do you know anything Jesus said about money?
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
But look, on a very, very serious note, to anyone who says the church should not be in debt, look, I agree with them. And if it were possible to continue the mission and be effective in the mission without going into debt, great. Let's figure out the way to do it. I simply have not found a way for us to accomplish the mission that he's given us without periodically using financial resources from a bank to be able to accomplish that, because this church campus and plant is the base. And as that base grows, we have more people giving, and that's the resources that go out that fund everything we do. Without the church campus, I don't believe we would have the resources that we have to be able to fund the things that we fund. And when we did the last build project, I mean, we saw a large growth in the size of our church as a result, and we've seen consistent growth in our budgets in recent years, really since that project. So we see, yes, we invested a lot of money and we borrowed money. We're also doing more in ministry and mission now than we were, 6-7 years ago.
It's I think, a good illustration of this is, we're about to, build new offices because we have to. And we literally have to, because where we have is not safe. And no one really wants to do that because it's not an exciting thing to spend money on. But we have to.
I was such a big fan.
Oh, yeah. We're just no. In fact, I think our staff team was like, is there any way we could just not do this so we can do something more and, more ministry, quote unquote ministry, but recognizing we really do have to do this. This is a great example of the tension to manage, because it goes back to what you guys were saying earlier. I think if you were to ask me, this is, of course, it's more fun to give to feed an orphan in Guatemala or support our pastors in India. That feels better to give directly to that. But God has, given the mission of the church to carry that vision. There's things we have to do more of those kinds of things. And I would say if you're one of those people who wrestles with that, as you should, I don't want to give because I want to give directly, hey, this is what God's called us to do. And it goes back to, there is a lot of accountability. There's a shared vision and there's a shared burden, I would say, in the implementation. And if you're someone who is just adamantly opposed to the church taking on debt, I would say to you, write the check, and we won't. And we won't have to, because I think it's we
need about 600,000 right now.
Yeah, so write that check. Somebody out there.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, do it so that we because our heart is, and not just our heart of this, us three, and it's just not even the heart of the staff, but the heart of the church leadership, and really the heart of the church is to say, we want to do more for the kingdom. And these things like new offices are kind of not speed bumps, but they kind of are, because we have to do something.
And I think there's some complexity. The larger a church gets, there's just complexity to it. And I do think people justify, like you said, terrible decisions without accountability because we're big and we're growing, But that's just a reality. It doesn't mean we're less faithful stewards. It just means, like the notorious B.I.G. said, the more money you come across, the more problems you see. And so, the reality is there's just more complications, I think, sometimes. But I'll say that I don't know what you make because I don't remember. But every dollar,
I just don't know.
Every dollar that the church invests in having an administrator really is worth it for us pastors and ministers to be able to do our job. And for my pastor friends that listen, if you come trying to hire him right now, you have to deal with me, so you better be strong. But really, we're thankful that you're a part of what you're doing, that you have a heart to be faithful steward beyond just it being you realize the church has a business aspect, but you see the church as a business and you're kingdom minded. And we are just so blessed to have you on our team, Steve.
That's right, because Steve is this rare hybrid of person who's he knows business so well, and his heart is all ministry, and he does lots of other things too. He teaches his leads life group, and this coming Sunday is going to be preaching. That's right. And so you should, that's this
right.
week. Yeah, right. So he's going to be preaching. So he can preach too, like really well. So I'm building you up. So don't disappoint.
Sir, don't put me on a pedestal.
We need to put you on a pedestal.
That's right, because you're still
put me on a taller pedestal.
So
you're a little bit shorter than us, and this hasn't helped at all.
That's right. So hopefully by now you've already approved our request for new stools in the studio. But so hey, if you've got questions about specific to our church, if you're a church member and you have questions about our church budget, our church process, Steve is the person to ask, and he will be fully open, honest, and transparent with you. So you can message him. You can send a message to Steve at churchonbayshore.org. And if you're another church listening and you're just curious how we process, our budgeting process, even the structure that Steve spoke about, the accountability that's needed, reach out. We one of our hearts, as one of our things we want to do, is to help other churches as we learn, not because we're experts. As we learn, we want to pass on what we've learned by trial and by error along the way. So reach out and let us know. I was going to say reach.
That was good. That was well done.
Thank you. All right. So hey, join
Maybe
us.
It's good that you have a week before you preach.
That's right. That's right. So we want you to reach out with those questions, and we also want you to join us next week as we wrap up this series.
We got a special, remember? 2 weeks.
That's right. Questions
so that's a good
and answers.
Time.
That's right. We got 2 weeks. So here's what we want to do. Next week, we got our last essential, and then we want to take another episode and ask and answer. Well, we want you to ask.
We're just going to ask questions and wait for you to answer.
And wait for you to text us. So we want you to ask questions. Something you've heard from the past few weeks, one of our essentials, or just questions you have about what it's really like inside the church. Or
where is the Holy of Holies on our campus?
That's right. Which closet is it in? We want to answer those. So you can send us a message. You can email us. You can shoot us a message on Facebook. However, you can send a carrier pigeon. Whatever you want to do, get us a question. We want to answer those questions. Leave a comment so that we have some content. Otherwise, it's just going to be another week of James and I rambling about things. And we've had
plenty of that. We've had plenty of that, though.
So, hey, thanks for joining us. Send your questions, and we'll see you next time.
Steve.
Way to go.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.